Whoa, I'm Chad Nash, and I'm with NashTech. At NashTech, we created a trading bot to enter and exit the market with the best settings, so that the bot can trade on your behalf and you can get your time back. Stop letting the big Wall Street guys win while you're stuck trading manually with emotion. Do you ever find yourself trading and then suddenly realize that you're changing your stop losses and your targets, or you start to get emotional and maybe enter at the wrong times when you know you shouldn't? Well, we understand that because we've been there. And with 15 years of software experience and several years of day trading experience, we created the perfect bot for this situation. Epic Profits allows you to stay in front of the 3-bar, 4-bar technical trade setup, allowing you to get your time back. For today's tutorial, we're going to be discussing Epic Profits. Before we get into Epic Profits, I just want to go into that NinjaTrader is an affiliate of ours. We're a vendor, a third-party vendor on top of them, but they are not directly associated with us, affiliated with us. Please check out the disclaimer. Understand that they're not endorsing our products, things like that. So good to mention. We are a third-party vendor, though. We work with them directly a lot, and we build on top of that platform. We appreciate their assistance, and we love what they have going on. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with Epic Profits. So Epic Profits is it's a technical pattern setup. And with the technical pattern setup, this is a very specific setup which would be called a 3-bar or a 4-bar play by a lot of people. We initially built a lot of the specs from a couple different setups. And all of those can be like set up and configured in this particular indicator and strategy. With that being said, our favorite is related to, I think it's Jared Wesley. I may have said that wrong. It's with Live Traders. He's a great guy, and the educational videos that he has are great. He has a live trading platform. I recommend it to anyone. I was part of it for a while. So what is Epic Profits? Epic Profits is a technical trading pattern that, as I mentioned, it would be considered a 3- and 4-bar play, and works on different time frames. I will say that it backtests better on equities, and if you're trading through any type of TD Ameritrade or sort of any of maybe TradeStation, maybe Interactive Brokers, it'll trade better. I believe it backtests better, at least on those setups, but it seems to backtest quite well as well with futures and forex, things like that. So the basic premise of this setup, especially if you were going from Jared Wesley and Live Traders, would be it starts out with a pretty well flat setup, meaning you're not already in a trend. So the indicator itself has options for this to enable a trend or disable it if it's in a trend, but in general, it starts out with a major igniting bar. So there's 3 bars in this 3-bar or 4-bar play. The first bar is the igniting bar, and that is a bar that is a engulfing large, this is a large bar in comparison to all the other bars, and that is the trigger bar, meaning you pay attention at that point to what's going on. The next bar would be the pause bar. There's never an entry on the second bar. And then based on the specifications, the general idea is that this bar does not go too far up, and it doesn't go really below like 50% of the initial igniting bar. So I believe Jared would explain this in his videos. Again, check them out. They're really great. His educational videos, his trainings are great. So if you look at this, the very basic idea would be your stop loss is here, and the confirmation bar would be on the 3rd bar or the 4th bar when it passed the pause bar. Passed meaning it was a higher or the same price was reached as the high of the igniting bar or the high of the pause bar. If it did not pass, this third bar becomes a pause bar. But it passed because the entry would be right where this is at here, at the high of the first igniting bar. And it goes from there. So that's kind of the 3-bar or 4-bar setup. From there, there's a lot of different configurations that can add more options, more setups, but not necessarily as clean. And we'll get into the actual profit targets and stop losses. We'll get into all of that in this video, but in a different section. Right now, we're just focused on the indicator, and I just want to focus on the actual settings of this indicator and what they do. Okay, so some of this is pretty basic, pretty standard stuff. Display arrows on the chart, display alerts. Most of that stuff actually is only useful down the road when it comes to the strategy, because if you're optimizing it, things like displaying arrows on the chart and alerts, they can actually add an extra piece to the optimization time, and you don't want that. I always suggest once you do optimize it, leave the arrows, leave the colors, leave all of that extra stuff off, and only focus on the nuts and bolts. Later, when you actually want to review the charts and review the best setups, go ahead and enable that again. Okay, so now we get into the parameters. So let's go through each one of these and talk about what they mean. Epic profit setup. You have relaxed and strict. Strict is not going to trade in a trend, and relaxed is going to allow you to trade in a trend. So by definition of, I guess, this epic profit setup and what it's meant to do, it's not meant to trade in a trend for the best configuration possible. So if you have already had 4 bars that are engulfing, triple the size, you're not going to, this is not going to count as the igniting bar, okay? But if you're not seeing as many setups, and if you want more configuration options, you can change this to allow it to trade in a trend. And it doesn't have to be a major trend. This can be, 20%, 30% trend, and you can sort of configure that. Okay, for the next piece of this, we're going to look at look back bars. So this is looking at the trend look back, 30 bars. So what does that mean? Well, we're looking at an 11-minute chart. So that means we're looking at 30 11-minute bars. So every single bar is a look back bar. So now previous high, low, average volume. It's going to average the volume of the last 30 11-minute bars on this chart. Right now we're looking at the M&Q September 21st of 2021. COVID is over. Okay. So now we have the average range. So what's the range? The high and the low. So here we have the high, we have the low, and we're going to compare that later to the average range. So this is looking at the average range of the last 30 bars. If you're only wanting to compare the range of 10 bars, that's where we have this. Later we'll get to the strategy optimization and preferences for backtesting, and you can sort of see what backtests best. Sometimes I like to look at volume average of like maybe 90 bars or 100, 120 bars, but yet for range, I may only be interested in the average range of maybe 15 bars. Okay, so especially if you're kind of looking at something like futures here, where you're looking at, overnight, what's going on, you don't really want to put a lot of that in comparison to what's going to happen during, market open in terms of the NASDAQ or something like that. All right, so the igniter range spike. Okay, so there's 3 bars that are really involved. It can be a 3-bar play or a 4-bar play, but there's really 3 bars involved. An igniter bar, which is what you see here in yellow, the pause bar, which is what's here in gray, and the confirmation bar. The confirmation bar is not part of what you're seeing here. The other 2 are part of that. Confirmation comes when it reaches the high for a long setup, it reaches the high of the pause or the igniting bar. Okay, so what does this say? This means spike percentage and range. This means 400%. This means we're really looking for really major movement in the range of the bar. So that's the very first part of this technical trading pattern, is the igniting bar. What triggers this to pay attention to? So we have to at least have 20%, according to this basic setup at the moment. We have 20% igniting volume over the average. For the range, we have 400%. So this is a big bar. Then, what happens with the pause bar? So this is the second bar. The pause bar is always the second or third bar in the configuration. What happens with the pause bar is it does not go below 50% or 90% of the first igniting bar. Actually, that means it needs to at least go in that range. Yeah, I'm confused, but I think actually it needs to fit in there somewhere in there for the igniting bar. So we don't want it dropping down below 50%, but we do want it sort of not just going skyrocketing to the moon still. We want to, this is a pause bar. It's meant to pause. I believe, as Jerry would say with live traders, they just ran a marathon and it needs to take a break. People, you know, the trader psychology really needs to decide what's going on in this trade. Is it going to continue up? Do I want to get out? How confident is this play? And that's what the pause bar is there for. Then the next part of this pause bar is the high maximum percent. So 130 means I don't want this pause bar to go more than 130% of the actual initial bar. The tighter setup would have this at least above 50, maybe above 60, and it would have the pause bar probably in the range of 110 to 130. I think this would still fit in. So we haven't really, you know, this is a great example setup here. Okay, so with this, let's just try to change some settings that we don't see here. Like this would already be in a trend, but maybe this is a pretty large engulfing bar. For a short, this is a pretty large engulfing bar. So the more setups you're going to see for this setup is going to be as you adjust these. So if we change this to be somewhere in here, let's see here, for perfect profits, you know, the look back is only comparing and creating averages for that number of bars. So that's not going to make a big difference. But the igniting bar, this 400% down to 200 is probably going to make a difference. Yeah, here we go. This is 200% the average, 200% above the average. So it becomes an igniting bar. You can't have a pause bar unless it's an igniting bar, right? So we have a igniting bar, and now let's look and set this. Why did this bar here? Why was it not a valid pause bar? Why did that not, you know, trigger? Well, because it's more than 110% of the igniting bar. So if you change this from 110, and actually it never really went down either. I mean, it did. I guess if you're looking at the high and the low. So I'm pretty sure if you change this to something like 170%, you're likely going to see that pause bar trigger. It didn't, so it must be another setup here. Let's see. This is where it's fun to play with. I don't know that it ever went below. If it had went below 60%, and it might have, it was one of those two. So as you adjust this, you'll see this trigger. This became an igniting bar, and it become the actual confirmation bar. Here you have the same example. Became an igniting bar. You have a pause bar. You have the confirmation. Why is it confirmation? Because it went above this candle and this pause bar was valid. If we increase this a bit from 50%, and we change this to be maybe even on the igniting bar, maybe like 250 or 300, you'll see where this changes in the setups. So the first example truly is still the best of the, I guess I would say, the textbook version of what this technical pattern has always been explained to me. Large engulfing igniting bar in an ongoing trend that's already been going here. Very clear, this is that bar. Confirmation comes after the second or third bar when it reaches the high of that bar. And at any point, the pause bar goes away and the play is dead. If it goes below, probably 50%. We'll cover here shortly the next piece of this, which is the stop loss and target profit. And that stop loss would generally be set mid-bar of the igniting bar. So that would be right around here. With a bar this size, though, it can be a little bit dangerous. Could be. We don't know. We'll have to see how it backtests. So let's just play around a little bit more with these settings to make sure we understand what's going on. Always a quick reminder at these times, you can download the latest templates for futures, Forex, a lot of crypto futures too, at www.nashtech.xyz/templates. Okay, so we've covered if it's in a trend or not. All of these are look back to compare the range and the volume look back. Any specifications for what causes the igniting bar in terms of the range and the volume. And then the pause bar doesn't want to go below 50%, doesn't want to go higher than 200%, and this is much better, as I said, more around 120, 130. You don't want that to just keep flying, right? So that's what takes that out, is that went up so high. Here, remember, the pause bar is what we're looking at. This was the confirmation when it did trigger here. If you were to change this to be 100%, it actually didn't even go over 100% on the pause bar for this. So that would still be valid. Should be. Yeah. Did it go over 80? I believe it did. So that would take that out. But that's never going to change. As long as it doesn't just go to the moon after the igniting bar, you're looking for the pause bar to kind of fluctuate in between, not lower than 50% of the igniting bar, not higher than 120, 130% of the igniting bar. That creates the pause. Confirmation comes when you get a new higher high of either the pause or the igniting bar. So I think we have covered that completely. There's not really anything. I guess I could mention that as you're looking at these setups, it is very useful to go to Show Data Box. And you can hover over these values at different times. It's a lot of values. We plot everything, non-transparent setups, or you can look at this and see, is this? Is this a potential pause bar? Is it a igniting bar? So you see right away it's an igniting bar set to 1, which is true. You see the average range. You see if it's a pause bar. So over here, if you hover over it, pause bar 1 is true. What would happen if this next bar had not went above the high of the first igniting bar? It would become a pause bar. What would happen if this candle drop down to here, it would no longer become a pause bar. The play would be over. So, in terms of epic profits, as a technical pattern for a 3-bar play, it's generally, you can change all of this, and I would optimize it and per instrument and per time frame. But generally speaking, you have a engulfing bar that is not already in a trend, a pause bar which has not lower than 50% of the igniting bar, not higher than roughly 120% of that bar, and the confirmation bar would come either the 3rd bar or the 4th bar. So that would be a 3-bar play or a 4-bar play, depending on how you would label that. You could look at different time frames. I haven't really looked at other time frames for this setup, but likely it's going to fall into many different time frames. Okay, so moving forward from that, let's just discuss a little bit about the strategy next. Boom, boom, boom. We're going to now add the strategy. So, again, with strategies, we have multiple videos, and we're going to be creating many more videos on all the different ways strategies are different from indicators, how to backtest strategies, how to set up simulator accounts, how to use strategy analyzer, how to use, how to enable strategies on the chart. And that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to enable strategies on the chart directly. And here is how we do that. Okay. I think I had actually earlier saved a template. So this is what I'm talking about with templates. Folks, here we go. So as we save templates, optimize them. I just saved a default earlier. But as you optimize them, you may find out that you want the igniting bar to be 50%, not 400%, right? That might be what backtests the best. So you look at MNQ April 2021, or these are Doji futures. Rar rar. Haha. Okay, so we'll look at this setup. We can go setting by setting again. Actually, let's just wait a minute for that. So right now, we're just going to look at the same sort of setup. So instead of average look back, let's look at 30 bars. 30 bars. 30 bars. Again, you're looking at the same configuration as what you visually saw that you liked on the indicator. Igniting volume, I think we had this at 20%. This was our big setting, was a big range. Range, again, average range, last 30 bars. Range is the high and low of the current bar. So big bar there, 400%. Pause bars, I think we had 50, 85, somewhere in there for the high. And then we're going to cover all the order entry and take profits and stop loss. We're going to cover all of that after we initially see this sort of working in terms of displaying what we want to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and enable this. It's a very important step whenever you set up the chart on, whenever you set the strategy on the chart, is you enable that. Okay, so we're not seeing anything. What's going on? Well, this is a good time to check that out. What is going on here? I don't know that that's the situation yet, but it's something to look at. This is a good time to talk about debug mode. So, to disable a to disable a strategy that you have previously enabled, you can go into the Strategies tab on the in NinjaTrader here. Strategies tab, right-click, disable, right-click, enable after you change it. But what I would want to change is debug mode, and when you change debug mode, it's going to spit out information in the output window. Well, Chad, what is the output window? Well, I'm going to tell you. Okay, enable debug mode here. Okay, this isn't enabled yet, but basically debug mode is going to spit out some very, very useful information to us. You can start that then by going to New, Ninjascript Output, and you're going to see some very, very useful information about configuring. This is great later when it's like, why did it not enter then? Why did it enter then? Why, are we in a flat position? Now we're enable the strategy. Now that I'm looking at this, I see two potential issues. So let's go into this. This is a good time. You don't want everything to go perfect in these situations. So what we're looking at now, we can go to the output window. It's not during trading hours. That very much could be the problem. I think we had enabled trading hours. But here's a great place to look here. Wait X bars from new trading day. That's set to 0. Position's currently flat. Do we have a recent exit? No. Are we skipping this is basically where we're going to go in terms of helping you. Why did it not enter in these places? We're going to go here. Maybe it's a bug. Maybe it's a problem. Maybe we need to change something. But it's good to understand why it didn't enter. And very possible two things are happening. So let's look at what those are. One is we're not displaying things on the chart. So right here, let's go ahead and display. The only time we don't usually want to display is whenever it is optimizing and not for backtesting, or not for actually enabling, where you're going to visually care to see it. Optimizing can take a lot of resources and time. So now that we've enabled it, we do see the setup. There it is. Why hasn't it traded? Well, going back to the debug mode, likely, and you'll always see a time in the debug mode. So what are you going to start comparing here? You're going to start comparing this bar, which is at 6/24, June 24th, 2021, at roughly 2:05, and you're going to start looking through the output log. Why do we have the output log enabled? Because we enabled debug mode in the indicator. You're going to look at the date, and likely in that time frame, you're going to see we're not in regular trading hours. Are we? Nope. Look, this is 2 in the morning. So how do we change that? Disable the strategy. By the way, the amount of times you have to disable and enable and change something and change the sim account and add the strategy setup and add the data series, and that's why we set this up as an indicator to begin with, because you want to get all the other settings pretty much configured, so you're not enabling and disabling based on those settings. You're enabling and disabling based on more strategy settings. What are strategy settings? Profit target, stop loss, data series, time frame, session time to trade, things like that. Okay, so if we disable the custom trading hours and we don't flatten, if you're off these hours, we probably don't need debug mode enabled at some point. That does take a lot of resources, so if you're trading live, never leave that enabled. Let's go ahead and hit OK. Instead of right-clicking and enabling here, I just want to get everyone familiar with how to do it in multiple places. So you can also come in to the actual chart, click on the strategies icon, and you can enable it here. We're not going to change anything. The only thing we change, we just say we change the time. I meant to disable that, and I want to disable debug mode. Okay. I like to set up sim accounts for every single minute I'm trading. So if this is an 11-minute chart, I want to be on my sim 11 account. Enable. And because we took off, we also want this to be enabled display indicator on charts. This should trade. And there we are. We went long. Really, we went long here. We don't have to take replay. It's going to show us the next bar on close, but we would have hit our profit target here. Likely would have hit a much larger target some of these other setups. So again, what if you want to change that? Same process, right click, disable, edit. Let's change our profit target from 60. We're on the MEQ. Change it to 300. Let's not touch our stop loss for this particular moment. Another area that you can enable it instead of on the chart. Right click, enable. Go back to the chart. Now our profit target's hit. Okay, so that looks pretty, looks good. Here's another setting we have not enabled. We have a setting to look at the tail of I guess you would call it the wick, topping tail. Generally speaking, and look at, there's a million different videos on candlestick patterns and so forth. But generally speaking, especially on a higher time frame, a topping tail is a sign of weakness to sell, and a bottoming tail is a sign of strength because it means that the buyers picked up. Up here, it means at one point in time, that candle was all the way very large engulfing bar. But it's a sign of weakness at that time that it's sold out down here. So there is an option, if you disable this, there is an option to close out the position if a tail is triggered, and then the size of the tail. Actually, we have exit reverse tail. It's actually enabled. Likely it's the size of the tail that did not trigger that. I would need to look at why that didn't trigger. But you get the idea. We're looking at, again, look back. Anytime you see look back, you're looking at the bars. And I'm sure if we change this to be 5, you're probably going to see more setups. Profit target. All right, so we're going to cover all of the profit target stop loss stuff here in a second. All those options. But the option to exit on those tails does exist. If it's not showing now, we'll go in later why it didn't. It did. Okay, so here we are. When we changed the amount of the tail, we had to change it to whatever percent of the last 60 bars. It was 6 times the tail of the last 60 bars. This triggered our exit. Was it more profitable? No. But if you backtest that, and this is showing you visually with these dots, other tails. So if we were short, that tail would have triggered either here or here and closed out the position if you have exit reverse tail. I say this as well because with all of the NashTech Epic indicators, most of them all have, actually all of them have exit on reverse tail. Epic long exit bear tail triggered. So I would still use it to only use when it's backtested, like to trigger that. Obviously in this case it would have exited early. Still profitable though, and a sign of weakness. That would be a time when you might want to be exiting. So our strategy is mostly going to consist of the setup we configured or optimized up here related to the indicator, all this pretty stuff. But we are now looking at, is it a market order or a stop market order? Anything related to market orders doesn't relate here on the parameters for stop market, so you can ignore these. What's the difference here? Well, if you're doing a stop market order, most people are used to a stop market for loss. But actually a stop market can be used for an entry as well. And what it's happening with an entry order such as this is we're not wanting it to enter until it reaches the target. So the stop market is actually set to that price, but it's set the bar prior to it during the pause bar on bar close. So what does that mean? The very first tick of this bar, we set the stop market order and it triggers right at that price. Okay, so you can also have a limit because market is you have no idea what price you're going to be guaranteed. There is no guarantee with that. With a limit, you could say, I only want to go $1 above, 10 cents above, I might look at that and see if it's set to ticks or what, but you get the idea. Stop market is entered beforehand, and when the condition's met, it triggers. It also kind of puts you in the front of the line for that, so that part's nice too. This can also then be triggered on bar close, which is a major performance enhancement as well. Now, trade direction. If you just find the absolute worst setup and it trades at such a bad situation, we've enabled this for all of our setups with Epic indicators. You can go reverse. If you've configured the absolute worst setup and it optimizes so poorly, just go in reverse. We've created that option for you. These are pretty well standard things, so let's just run through them real quickly. Wait X bars from the new trading day. Perfect. You're not necessarily trading the session time. You're not trading. You're not changing other stuff with the instrument times. Instrument time. You're just waiting 5 bars maybe from the time that the instrument starts trading in the trading session. That's very good if you're trying to avoid maybe the market open. ADX values maximum chop. So here's the situation with these two variables. Whenever we configured all of our different strategies, we discovered, we went other indicator, we added every other indicator, one at a time, sometimes multiple, and we looked at every single one that mattered in the setups we were creating. And there were situations where we wanted to require a certain level of ADX indicator, so you could just add that indicator. Actually, not on here, but you could add it as an indicator. This is Strategies tab. And there's also a NinjaTrader choppiness indicator. So, anytime, for example, that might be over 50 or 55 or 45, we found that we didn't want to enter because we're in a choppy market. So this setting is there in a lot of our indicators. Doesn't necessarily mean it's defaulted actually to kind of exclude. There's very few times ADX is going to show below 5. And there's very few times the choppiness indicator is going to show above 60, especially 65 or something like that. So that's what that's about. Okay, enable long trades, enable short trades. You can disable these here. This would overwrite whatever you're doing up here in the EMA. It wouldn't overwrite it. It just wouldn't trade long if you were below the 200 EMA and you had, it would basically go, it would work together. So it's not going to trade long ever if this is disabled. All right, so those are pretty standard. All right, take profit, stop loss. Profit target, this can be just a standard set of ticks, and you are taking a profit target of 300 ticks. This can also be a recent high-low. So what does that mean? Well, if the recent high was here, let's just say it was like right around this range, it would take in range, so you have a high and a low, this is going to set a profit target of 5 ticks. Sorry, if you have recent high-low, it's going to set a profit target below, 5 ticks below the range, the high, sorry. if you were going long. So if it backtests out well and you think this is an uptrending market and the setup is going, you can close out your profit target 5 ticks outside of that range. So what does that mean? If your recent high low was set to here, it'd be 5 ticks above that range. So with standard setup, it's basically ticks, percent, pips, based on your instrument. Take profits in bars up or down. If you are long and you have 7 bars consistently green, or 9, whatever you set this to, it will close the position. This is oftentimes a very great early exit. Again, it's back tested. Do what the optimization results tell you, but you're going to get a much earlier exit than typically with adjusting that. Bars required before re-entry. This is great depending on different setups, and again, it's used in all of our indicators. Whenever you exit a position, these would be called no trade bars or waiting bars, or I guess you can call them pause bars. Usually with epic indicators and epic strategies, these are white bars on the chart. What does this do? Enable exit after number of bars. Okay, positive, negative, doesn't matter what your profit is, it would exit after 5 bars. There are some setups that you would want to exit no matter what. Some of our indicators, some of our strategies, some of the time frames at 3 bars. Just get out. If you did not make profit in the next 3 bars, probably you wouldn't, or it's more in the mix, or you don't know. So that's what that's for. If you don't enable it, it's never used. No problem. Same thing with here. This goes 4 bars in to your trade and sets the stop loss to break even as long as you're positive. So with this, maybe you want to set this to 2, and now you know at least your stop loss has been moved to break even, and that might backtest out well. It might be the best. Exit reverse tail, we just covered what that is. Stop loss. Trailing, parabolic. I'm just going to go in standard stop loss, trailing stop loss. Everybody kind of gets that, right? Your standard stop loss or trailing stop loss, you're going to go with a trailing stop loss of 30 ticks is what this is saying. If you go, trailing ticks. When you go to last bar, high, low, offset type, it does not matter if this last bar, high, low, offset type, it doesn't matter. These 2 settings are ignored unless you choose last bar, high, low. Last bar, middle, the middle of the bar. It's used a lot in this setup. Ongoing last bar, this changes every single bar the stop loss moves. Are you going to get stopped out? Probably pretty quickly, but that can be okay. Sometimes ongoing last bar, high, low is used as a profit target. It's likely never going to hit the profit target, but your profit's going to be taken at the stop loss of the previous bar. All right, so when you see offset, what does offset mean? This means if you entered here, this candle, the 3rd candle, and you had a 1 tick offset, the stop loss of the last bar high low, would be 1 tick below the pause bar. That's what it's going to be set to. All right, if it was 5 ticks below, it's going to be 5 ticks below the last bar high low. If it's ongoing, it's going to be ongoing. Every bar is going to change the stop loss. This is a maximum. This is very, very useful in these situations with epic profits, because with a bar this size, it could be twice this size. You don't want to ever be stuck with a situation that turns out to be, your stop loss does not want to be that massive with that setup. All right. I think this is pretty much going to cover it. These other items, the custom trading hours, the quantity, ATM orders, we cover that in the epic bid video that we just posted last week or so. I don't know. Appreciate your time. Please like, subscribe, any type of thing that, or any type of setup you want to see, any tutorial you want to see, whether it's NinjaTrader, strategy optimization, anything related to the Epic indicator modules. If you're looking for a setup that you would like to see, we've done so many of these now, it doesn't have to be all that expensive. So reach out to us, please, and let us know what you want to see more of, and we will make a video on that. Okay, thank you guys very much.